Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about fertilization, but I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective than some of the other videos we've been checking out. So this is going to give you some more framework with kind of time and location and logistics from the perspective of the sperm cell swimming through the female reproductive tract. Okay, so let's keep in mind, really importantly, that fertilization really has a very specific window. So sperm can actually live for about 72 hours, that's 3 days, in the female reproductive tract. And the egg also has a clock. It's good for about 1 or 2 days as well. So that really puts us in a pretty narrow window within the menstrual cycle. If we kind of add that up and pull it all together, there's really only a 5-day window that someone can get pregnant during their menstrual cycle. So theoretically, let's say just before ovulation, sexual intercourse is engaged in, and there are some sperm waiting in the female reproductive tract for 3 days prior to ovulation, that can result in pregnancy. Also, someone could ovulate, that egg could last for 2 days, and then sexual intercourse could happen, and fertilization could happen towards the end of that egg life. So we have about 3 days on the sperm and about a day or 2 on the egg. So again, there's really only about a 5-day window that we're looking at with that fertilization as possible. And I'm going to go through some other factors that are going to influence that and tie a couple of things together with menstrual cycle. Okay, so let's go back to the sperm cells, and remember they're part of a larger fluid called semen. Okay, so with each ejaculate, what is released is somewhere between 2 and 6 milliliters of semen. If you're not up on your metric conversion, that's like a spoonful or 2 of semen. Now again, remember, the sperm are only making up 10% of that mixture. There are about 182 million of those sperm cells packed in, making up that 10% of semen. There's going to be other things that are very important in the semen, including buffers that are going to raise the very acidic pH of the vagina and make it more hospitable for sperm. Remember, the vagina has to be acidic so that it can fight off infection and bacteria. It's basically a self-cleaning oven. So in those moments that you want fertilization to happen, the sperm have to bring their own buffers to make a nice neutral pH of 7. And the semen also contains some sugars. Remember, those sperm cells are going to be packed with mitochondria right in their mid-piece. Those are going to be the energy factories for their cells, so they better take some sugar with them so they can power the energy factories. And like I said, there's about 182 million sperm in the average male ejaculate. There's really a window. I mean, some people are under, which are going to be probably more infertile if you're towards the 40 million range, and people that are at 500 million are very fertile. Okay. Minimum qualifications, you've got to have at least 20 million sperm per milliliter. Again, if you're ejaculating only 2 milliliters, you're going to be, right at the bottom end of that fertility window. And they don't all have to be normal. Remember, men are producing quantity, not quality. So we only need, a 60% of the sperm to be normal. And what's abnormal? Well, you can just take a look here at these changes in morphology. 2 heads, 2 tails, broken midpiece, something strange. All of those are being produced right along with the normal sperm. But for fertility, we're going to need a certain percentage of normal good swimmers. Okay, it's just a 6-inch trip. That's all the further they have to go whenever the sperm are deposited in the vagina. And even at that, they're going to get deposited right at the base of the cervix because the penis is usually reaching further into the vagina. So all they have to do is swim through the cervix, which actually is going to be kind of challenging because of the cervical mucus, make their way through the vagina, and then find their way up the uterine tube and get to the ampulla where the egg either will be waiting or will be in a day or two. Of those 182 million that the average male is producing per ejaculate, only 100 to 1,000 are going to make it the whole way to the oviduct. This is why we need 182 million, because most of them are going to fail or get lost along the way. Okay. And then really the end of the oviduct, the ampullar isthmus area, which is the site of fertilization, there's only going to be 20 to 200, and we're going to need them. Okay, so what's going to help the sperm cells out is, again, things that they brought in the semen with them. The semen actually has a protein called fibrin. Okay, and fibrin is actually stored as fibrinogen. The gen at the end tells you it's going to generate into something else. It's a precursor. So whenever fibrinogen in the semen turns into fibrin, we get kind of a clotting or coagulation reaction. Fibrin is the exact same protein that allows us to make scabs after a couple minutes whenever we cut ourselves and are bleeding. So the semen's actually going to thicken up right away after deposition. That's going to allow the semen to stick to the vaginal walls and stick to the cervix and have a fighting chance of climbing and swimming up into the cervix. If it didn't coagulate, that very liquid fluid would just kind of fall out of the vagina and you wouldn't really have much of a chance here. Now, the semen can only stay thick for so long, so after 20 minutes, when everything's kind of good and stuck, that semen will start to liquefy. And that's going to allow the ones that are stuck to start swimming, and as long as they're swimming and moving, they're going to be able to reach the cervix. It's also thought that the female orgasm is helpful as well. A lot of these sperm cells reach the top of the uterus faster than a known sperm cell can swim. So those rhythmic contractions of the vagina and uterus are thought to actually drive and pull some of the semen upward, which is helpful. Less swimming work for the sperm. Okay, once the sperm reach the cervix, they're starting to swim. This is really going to determine whether they go any further or not. So again, we got to think back to menstrual cycle and what's going on with the woman. If she's within a couple days of ovulation, her cervical mucus is going to be nice and thin. Okay, and those sperm cells are going to be able to swim through the mucus quite easily. If we're nowhere near ovulation, there's no point in sperm entering the female reproductive tract. Even if they did, there's no egg to fertilize. Let's not even let them in. Okay. The cervix will look much more like this first figure. The cervical O's is a lot tighter. It's a lot narrow of an opening. And then all of this mucus is very thick. Women can tell this, and they can do a test called the spin Barkeet. This is something I usually mention with menstrual cycle. If you get a little bit of the vaginal or cervical mucus on your fingers and touch your two fingers together, if the mucus sticks more to your fingers and splits apart, it's thick. This is no good for sperm swimming. If you're near ovulation day and you have nice thin mucus, you can do the spin Barkeet test. Put your two fingers together with the mucus on it, pull them apart, and if it's stringy and more like the consistency of spit than like a thick mucus, then the sperm are going to be able to swim and you know you're nearing ovulation. So this could be, again, one of those signs if you're trying to get pregnant, you're going to want to look for that thin mucus so that you can have intercourse on a day closer to that so that you're more likely to get pregnant. Okay, but if your spin Barkeet's thick, you got thick cervical mucus and a closed cervical O's, these guys aren't going anywhere and they'll just get reabsorbed into the female reproductive tract. Okay, let's assume we are near ovulation day and we have nice thin cervical mucus and we've had some uterine contractions. The sperm have been pulled upwards into the uterine cavity. they may or may not be swimming. There's not a lot of fluid in the uterus, so they might actually be more like crawling and using their tail to help propel them. Either way, that tail is very critical and very necessary. Okay, so again, those uterine contractions, there might even be little cilia, little hair-like projections that are going to kind of do the wave and help move those sperm upward. Okay, so again, remember, we only at this point have about 100 to 1,000 sperm at this point that have successfully made it to the top of the uterus. Now they must choose. Are they going to go to the left uterine tube or to the right? One of them is going to be wrong because you only ovulate out of one ovary per month, right? Our ovaries are taking turns, ladies. So the right ovary ovulates 1 month, and then the left one's going to go the next month. So as the sperm are swimming, they have no idea. Okay. It is thought that there is some sort of chemo or thermo attraction that pulls the sperm in once they're close to the egg. But at this point, whenever they're at the top of the uterus and they have to go left or right, most of them, or none of them are going to know. So 50% of them are going to be wrong. Okay, so once they make their way partially down into the uterine tube, again, there's going to be probably like a thermoattraction. Maybe the egg is kind of hotter and they're like heat-seeking missiles, or maybe there's a chemical that the egg is putting out, and they're going to zero in on it. The way that the sperm swim whenever they're trying to find the egg is they really kind of zoom in a circular pattern. So they're kind of dive bombing, and that's going to help them find the egg, because it would be better for them to do that than just, you know, commit and overshoot. So they're going to do a lot better if they kind of swirl in towards the egg. Okay. And at this point, now we have about 100 of them left that successfully have found the egg. Okay. And then what's going to happen whenever we have that last little group that has successfully found the egg? You can go back to the other video that we just watched. There will be some sperm cells chipping away at the cumulus orifice. Remember, those are the follicle cells that are kind of stuck to the egg. So they're all going to be chipping away at that. And, you know, everyone kind of jokes and says, oh, it just takes one sperm. You actually at this point still need about 100 of them, because that cumulus orifice is thick. The acrosome of one sperm cell is not going to be able to chew through the whole cumulus orifice and then the zona pellucidea, that eggshell that's around the outside of the egg. So you are going to need an army of about 20 to 100 chipping away. And then whenever that first one does reach the zona pellucidea, right, we get those reactions within the egg, cortical reaction, which is going to stop other sperm from coming in, right, polyspermy. But we really do need an army of 20 to 100. One sperm reaching the egg is not going to do it. So that's why we need to start with 182 million, get down to about 100, and then we do finally just have one winner at the end. Okay, and then again, just one final point. Again, if a woman is close to ovulation, her cervical mucus is thin, semen are swimming through the reproductive tract, but the egg hasn't actually ovulated yet, again, don't forget, they'll just wait, right? They'll hang out here in the ampulla or in the isthmus, and they'll just wait for ovulation to happen. So again, we really do have a little bit of a 5-day window there. So you do have to be careful with your family planning, depending on if you were trying or not trying to get pregnant around those days.